Welcome to Orca Watch Live with Robin Petch.
Good evening and welcome to our Orca Watch Live special, our Scottish Photo ID Catalogue special. Before we look ahead to the rest of the evening, let's say thank you to all of our supporters and sponsors without which this would not be possible, not least NatureScot, the PlungeIn Coasts and Waters Community Fund, who've made this possible. Thank you very much to NatureScot. We also have a lot of folks in the local community who've provided great support to this and who are very much involved in some cases. So thank you to all of our partners from the local community. We have a number of official accommodation partners. Of course, a lot of us were expecting to be up there, but I know they're hosting some of our watchers and observers and visitors to the area. So thank you for supporting us throughout all of this. And our various collaborators, many organisations and individuals working with us. Without them, again, none of this would be possible. A big thank you to all of the collaborators. And we'll hear from some of these people tonight, but our correspondents on the ground, we're going to hear from Steve and Karen, but Emma, Claire and Lucy are doing a great job keeping everything going, keeping all the balls in the air in that part of the world. So thank you to all of our correspondents on the ground too. Okay, let's have a little just look ahead briefly to the rest of the week first. We've got two more Orca Watch Lives tomorrow and Friday, and then a special again on Saturday. Julia Sutherland will be talking about orca predation on seals and the ecological consequences of that. And we round everything up on Sunday, look back at the highlights of the week, and also look ahead to the rest of the year to National Whale and Dolphin Watch and other things. So join us for the rest of the Orca Watch Lives all the way through till Sunday. Okay, tonight, very special evening. After I've looked at the sightings and the weather for tomorrow, I'll be introducing Dr. Peter Evans, the Director of Sea-Watch. I will have a little talk to Peter, and then I'll hand over the evening to Peter, who will be helping lead the discussion later in the day. So we would like you very much to start sending in questions. You will have a chat function on your feed. You can start sending in questions now via the YouTube chat or to Orca Watch Online 2021. And when the question and answers come after the short film, all about the killer whale catalogue and those people involved, you'll be able to hear your questions answered live by some of the team. Okay, let's have a little look then at what's going to happen, excuse me, what's been happening today. We have a sightings map prepared by our sightings officer, Chiara Bertulli. So we'll have a little look at that. These are the sightings that she has entered for today. As you can see, we've had harbour porpoise around in the Hebrides. We've had minke whales, a fin whale, probable fin whale, seen by Steve. He'll talk to us about that in a little while. Bottlenose dolphins there in the Moray Firth, and some grey seals from the John O'Groats Ferry as well. So some really nice sightings there. So I have a little slideshow with the various sightings in a little bit more detail just to share with you. And just have to mention before we go on, of course, that that wonderful breaking news yesterday about the new calf in the 12s pod. This wonderful photograph by Ryan Nisbet at the head of the sightings update here. So here's the additional detail from the sightings map, just a little bit of background. Those harbour porpoises in the Hebrides area, seen from two different boat companies. The minke whale, actually seen by one of our Yorkshire observers who's up there, and I know for a fact she is very excited. And I'm really sorry, Joe, I've put an E on your name. Joe is not a Joe, she's a Joe without an E. That's my error, I do apologise for that. But Joe and Andrew saw a minke whale and very, very excited to have got up there. Joe was only recently trained as an observer down here in Yorkshire. Lucy was with Steve on the ferry, saw grey seals. Steve in the evening saw a fin whale, probably. Possibility it was a minke whale, but Steve's pretty sure that it was actually a fin whale that he saw. So we have Steve with us, and we can talk to Steve about his sighting now, I think, if Steve's there. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Robin. How's it going?
Hi there. All good. What's it been like today, first of all, just before we get on to your sightings yesterday?
Well, we've been a bit unfortunate weather-wise at Duncansby Head all week, actually. Today has been probably the same as it's been all week in one day. Started off absolute pea soup, couldn't even see the lighthouse. We got across to Orkney on the first ferry, and then it just suddenly cleared. And it was okay, reasonable visibility. And then the third ferry we're on, it just completely closed in. Really atmospheric, but not very good for sightings. But at the moment, I can just about make out Stroma.
Okay. I notice you're hiding in the van, so I'm guessing it's not too clever out there right now either. Okay, well, we're really here to talk about yesterday. And I know you had some interesting sightings from the ferry. Just before we talk about the other ones, I am going to mention to people that I know there was a single Risso's dolphin hanging around, and that didn't make it onto the map. So would you say a little bit about that? Because I gather it was quite close to the harbour.
Oh, it was really close. There's actually, in front of the harbour, there's actually an area of kind of slack water. As probably most people are aware, the Pentland Firth is extremely turbulent, very strong tides, very strong currents. And there's a lovely slack in front of the harbour, and the Risso's was in there probably for a couple of hours, completely on its own, just seemed to be milling around. Got quite a good few views. Joy and Tim Marshall were the first ones to spot it, I believe, from the actual ferry while we were waiting to set off.
Yeah, I think it's Joy that actually reported it. Yeah,
that's right. And in typical fashion, as we set off on the ferry, it vanished. But it was there when we came back. So yeah, we got some reasonable views. There's a few photos of the dorsal fin, but I don't think anyone managed to get the head of it.
And I think Lucy was with you on the ferry, and she's also reported a lot of seals, grey seals, during the trip as well.
Yeah, well, we've been doing the usual 2 ferry runs a day across to Berwick, and we've also been fortunate that John O'Groats Ferries, one of the partners, they've been amazing. They've been putting on additional wildlife trips, so we've actually been getting 2 wildlife trips a day at the moment. One across to Stroma, one across to the Duncansby Stacks. If you're ever in the area, well worth a trip. Amazing. And yeah, we've been seeing plenty of seals, which is obviously encouraging from the killer whale point of view, because that's essentially why they're here.
I'm not at all jealous about the fact that I should have been up there and going out on the ferry at all. So no, so don't rub it in, Steve, please. Yeah, I had another good sighting in the evening too, and probable fin whale, we've said, but I know you're pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, I unfortunately I only saw it once. I was actually just making a cup of tea, and I was sat in the back of my van, and I just thought while the kettle was heating up, I just thought I'll pick up the bins and have a look. And literally, you know how it goes. Just some days you can be looking for hours and see nothing. And I lifted the binoculars, and suddenly this whale appeared right through my view. So the reason I think it wasn't a minke whale is because I saw a lot of back, and then the dorsal fin was very flattened, very gently sloped, not like a typical sort of sickle-shaped upright minke whale. And then there was quite a bit of body behind it, but it wasn't the biggest of whales. So I didn't want to say 100% fin whale. As you're probably aware, we get quite a lot of minkies here. So yeah. One other person did see it afterwards and also said they saw a very gently sloped dorsal fin. So we're fairly sure, but unfortunately not 100%.
That's it. So I mean, just for the benefit of guests as well who are watching, who are perhaps not as familiar with this as you and I and others are, I mean, it is really important not to say for certain that you've seen a certain species unless you are absolutely certain, and that's why we rate them possible, probable, and definite when we do this. And as you can see, even someone who's got the experience Steve has, that you can't always be sure, especially if you see it just the once. So Yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for joining us as always. And if you haven't finished it, I'll let you get back to that jalfrezi. Bye for now. Okay, just moving on then, just to look at the other sightings that we've logged. So these are the ones we saw on the sighting map, but as we've explained on a number of occasions, not everything always makes it to the map in time. It depends when it comes in. The map can only ever be a snapshot. This is our list for today. The list for yesterday that we've prepared today of those breaking news sightings. And as you see, the Rissos was seen by a number of people. Joy was mentioned, Leslie Hawkins as well, and our own Lucy saw that too. You see the fin whale there, and there are also the bottlenose in the Moray Firth that have been listed. And these are Steve's photographs of the Rissos, which he kindly sent us to share with you. We think it's a relatively young animal. Peter Evans and I, our director, were talking earlier about it. Looking at the coloration and the fact it's not heavily marked, it seems that it's likely fairly young. And the other interesting fact, and it's worth pointing out, is how different an animal can look. Look how pale it looks in the picture on the left, how dark it looks on the right, yet that is the same animal. If you look at the shape of the fin, and as Steve said, there was only one there. So again, when you're trying to identify animals, depending where the sun is shining and how the light reflects off them, ID can be very tricky. It's not as easy as it looks when you look at the pretty pictures in the books. Okay, very quickly looking at today, it has been a quiet day, and I know a little later Karen will probably mention the sighting that they had in what we have described as less than optimal sea state and visibility, being a bit rough and windy and a bit foggy. And Karen's also seen harbour porpoise today, so a little bit more detail on that perhaps by tomorrow, but a quiet day for various reasons. So a very quick trawl around the areas, the main regions, as you can see there. This is southwest Scotland and the Inner Hebrides. These are all the absolutely confirmed sightings that are already entered into the database. Some of them have just been entered directly by the observers in the various locations. So as you can see, a number of different things. Northwest Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, we've got common dolphins again. I think we've seen them most days in that part of the world. More Risso's dolphins around there. More harbour porpoises. Dolphin species, there's one of those examples where we're not sure what species it is, so we enter it as dolphin species. And more harbour porpoise, common dolphins, northwest Scotland and the Outer Hebrides. Orkney and North Scotland, so we're back in the area where we are, so some of these from previous days, the sightings that have been entered already into the database. We've mentioned some of these on previous programmes. And as always, bottlenose dolphins ever present in northeast Scotland. The Moray Firth area, of course, is the central home territory for what are known as the Moray Firth dolphins. But interestingly, those dolphins are now seen regularly right down here in Yorkshire. Some of the dolphins, in fact, we see down here in Yorkshire and Northumberland haven't been seen in Scotland for 2 or 3 years now. So as always, for the very latest information, keep checking the breaking news sightings page and the verified sightings page on the Sea-Watch website. Okay, find links in your YouTube feed. All the way through, you will see we have an appeal running all the time, especially for donations to the PayPal Giving Fund. So check beneath your image in the feed on YouTube, and you can click a link there to donate to Sea-Watch to support all the work that we are doing. Thank you, as always, for any contributions. Okay, let's have a quick look at the weather before we move on with the rest of the programme. And as you've heard, the weather's not been perfect today, but looking ahead to tomorrow, we've still got over most of our area quite windy conditions. As you can see, 15 to 20 knot winds. All of that green area is winds up to around about 20 knots. If it's the yellowy area, it's pushing towards 25. A little bit paler to the east of Shetland and pretty sheltered around the Hebrides. So that's a better area to be. So it might be a little bit choppy, which always makes it harder. And again, Karen may well mention that with regard to today's sighting as well. Let's look on and see the visibility tomorrow. And we've got some sort of moderate visibility over most of the area, basically. Not fantastic, but not really awful. So there's no mention of any fog there. So fingers crossed it will stay reasonably clear for us. And finally, have a quick look at the swell. If you remember, we've talked about this. We'd like a flat, calm sea with zero swell, but we'll settle for up to about 0.5 metre, which is the pale blue areas. And again, the Inner Hebrides area off the west coast there, pretty sheltered. The Moray Firth also fairly still. You can see some very pale areas there where it is going to be calm. Inshore, fairly smooth, up to 0.5 metre of swell. And again, towards the east of Orkney there, you can see it's fairly pale, but it's pushing towards 1.5 metres or more, a little bit further offshore and to the west. Okay, that's the weather. So fingers crossed for some more sightings tomorrow to build up our records a little bit. Has been quite a quiet day today, as we said, so let's hope for a few more sightings. Okay, just reminding you again, looking ahead to the rest of the week, lots of things to look forward to. Do come and visit us every evening if you can, but you can click those links and view everything retrospectively. So if you are busy, and I know there are other things on, I know my mum and dad are watching the tennis, for example. So if you do miss a show, do pop back and have a look later, but do especially join us for Saturday's Orca Live special. Julia Sutherland talking about the ecological consequences of orca predation on seals, and Sunday for our roundup of the week. Keep that chat coming in, keep those questions coming in for our team, YouTube chat, or email us at orcawatchonline2021@gmail.com, and our team will be waiting to answer those questions. Okay, let's move on and introduce the director of the Sea-Watch Foundation, Dr. Peter Evans. Are you there, Peter?
Yes, thanks very much. Good evening to you, Robin. I'm on the north coast of Anglesey, and you're on the coast of Yorkshire.
Yeah, just on the banks of the Humber in Yorkshire. So it makes us look so professional as if we're all in the same place, but everybody is spread all over the country. So thanks very much to our producer, Phil, for bringing us all together. We've met you already, of course, Peter, those people that came to the Saturday evening of talks, got to meet you briefly there, and we heard all about Sea-Watch Foundation during that talk. And I would urge people to go and have a look at that if they haven't seen it. It's the one event of the week that we charge for. So if you go to Eventbrite, you can go back and look at that. But I'm sure that listeners would be very interested just to hear briefly how you got involved, really, and how we ended up with the Sea-Watch Foundation.
Yes, interesting. And I guess this is a lesson to anybody, particularly any young person that wants to take up a career in cetaceans. I mean, my background was very much in bird watching. From the age of 5, I was a bird watcher, a really avid bird watcher, and I joined every possible society, RSPB, BTO, and so on. And it was my interest in conservation, I guess, that first of all grabbed me when I was a schoolboy and read, these inspiring books like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and a variety of other books as well that were highlighting problems facing the planet in terms of, pesticides, obviously, for Silent Spring, and then the state of our oceans, over the exploitation of whales, and of course also of destruction of rainforest. And in fact, I got into rainforest conservation quite early on and set up a project in the Caribbean there. But I very quickly developed a passion for whales and dolphins. And I did that through my interest in seabirds, in particular, going out when I was still a schoolboy, in fact, out of Southwest Ireland, doing sort of pelagic trips there, looking for seabirds, but finding whales as well. My very first fin whale was seen back in 1968, in fact, off the old head of Kinsale in County Cork. And we went out actually hoping to see lots of rarer seabirds, and like Corrie shearwaters, little shearwaters and so on. But instead, what we saw was, because it was really nice weather, were lots of dolphins and a few whales as well. So that really got me very interested in this. And I discovered that hardly anybody in Britain anyway seemed to be working on them. No one working on live ones. They were working on just dead ones. And I couldn't understand that really. And so when I then left school and went to university, I tried to gather together various colleagues and friends and things who were birders, and advertised it wider, and formed what was called the Cetacean Group. And then from that came the Sea-Watch Foundation. And really, I wanted to sort of try and encourage anybody that could be out there spotting animals to record those. And of course, the conservation issues that we were facing, starting off with overhunting of centuries of overhunting of whales and dolphins, became other problems like pollution and incidental capture in fishing gear and so on. So really, that sort of kept on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked already in some of our other talks that this is all at round about the same time, that over in Canada, Michael Bigg and his team were getting together and starting to develop that similar interest in cetaceans and the catalogue. But I know, although you met them there, it's actually more interesting to talk about some of the people you've met subsequently, because we've heard about that bit, but you've worked with people who are more involved more recently with orca studies in various ways.
Yes, I met people like Mike Bigg and Ken Balcombe and John Ford. Actually, first of all, I think it was in the mid-1970s at a big international meeting organised by the Food and Agriculture Organisation in Bergen, Norway, where we were all meeting to try to understand the problems that whales and dolphins were facing and how we were going to tackle them. And they were there, and then met them subsequently, and also met some of the Norwegians who were working on orcas along the Norwegian coast. And in fact, then also the Icelanders as well. So Tiu Simila, who was one of the pioneers, did her PhD on the orcas in Norway. She actually worked for us later on for Sea-Watch there, but formed a close friendship with her. And Fernando Ugarte, who had worked with her, he then was involved when Keiko, the Free Willy killer whale that had been rescued from marine land and then the Mexico City aquarium where he was, and had been released in Iceland. And Fernando tracked Keiko from there over to Norway. Sadly, Keiko didn't last very long, but Fernando then later came and worked with us as monitoring officer in Wales, and now he's in Greenland, in fact, continuing his sort of cetacean research there. So yeah, there are lots of little connections that we have.
Fabulous. Well, I'm about to hand over to you, Peter, for the rest of the evening, because I get the rest of the evening off now, and you're going to host this wonderful evening we have looking at the Scottish killer whale catalogue. So Peter, I'll hand over to you, and enjoy the evening, everyone. Goodbye from me.
Thanks very much, Robin. And I'd like to bring in the participants of this evening's show, really. Karen Hall and Steve Truluck, and also I hope Karen Munro may be there. And we've got a discussion following that has been pre-recorded, which we'll be showing. And these are some of the very active people that have made this wonderful catalogue that we've talked about before and shown pictures from, the photo ID catalogue. So I don't know if you're there, we can just see you. Otherwise, we'll see you after the discussion. Yes. Okay. Hi, Karen. You're there.
Hi, Peter.
Steve is probably still eating his supper. Oh no, he's there. Good. Great. And I hope Karen Munro will join us shortly. But let's go straight over then to the presentation that's been pre-recorded. And then once that's through, we'll have a little break and then we'll come back and have a discussion and answer quite a few questions that have been put over the last few days and this evening.
Well, a very big welcome to the Orcaholics, as I think you're known in the trade. I'm very pleased to have the gang behind the latest edition of the Scottish Killer Whale Photo Identification Catalogue 2021 with us today to just explain a bit about how it's been improved and updated. Do you want to just introduce yourself and say where you're based? Steve first.
Yeah, so I'm Steve Truluck. I'm a whale watching skipper and guide for Hebridean whale cruises out of Gairloch. I spend most of my time in the Moray Firth trying to see orcas and cringing at all of the lovely footage that Hugh keeps getting from Shetland, and yourself as well, Karen. But I've also been a regular up at Orca Watch as well, so can't wait to be up there.
Excellent. Hugh, you're next.
Yeah, good evening or good afternoon or good morning, depending on which time this is going to be broadcast or where you are in the world. I'm Hugh Harrop. I'm the Field Director at Shetland Wildlife here in Shetland, nearly as far north as Karen Hall there. Karen lives about 2 miles as the Orca swims to the north of me. I've been involved in wildlife all my life, as well as being a naturalist guide. I'm also a photographer, a drone pilot, and just an all-round nice guy, really, as Steve and Karen and everybody will attest. So welcome, everybody.
And last but by no means least, Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Munro, and I don't have any work-related thing. I'm just a person that goes out in my spare time and likes to watch orcas. We get them here in Caithness. I'm based in Scrabster, but we travel around the county, and the peak time's about now, May, and that's why Orca Watch tends to be started at Duncan's Behead, I think in 2012.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I think something like that, yeah. And of course, unfortunately, we were not able to have Andrew Scullion with us, who is one of the team that also put a lot of work into this new catalogue. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen so we can talk about the catalogue. And some great pictures there, Steve. The front page. So, I mean, firstly, it's an absolutely amazing bit of work, and I don't think any of us can underestimate just how much work has gone into this. So, can you tell us a bit about what you've done in this update?
Well, all credit really to Andy Foote in the first instance. As we all know, Andy created the first catalogue back in 2009. After a couple of field seasons of research, and then started. There you go. There's Karen holding the original document there, and that was then followed by a supplementary update in 2019. Like any photo identification catalogue, it's been organic. It's been ongoing and very much an evolution. Obviously, not just with the orcas, but also with with photo identification per se. Once upon a time, I'll go back even later, we used to have things like this. I don't know if you can see this. This is the original Shetland Cetacean Group report dating back to 1993. Steve probably was still in natties in those days. But that's how far back we've been looking and studying orcas here in Shetland. And those are the days, some of you won't even know what film cameras were about, but we used to actually take photographs and wait for the results to come back 2 weeks later on slide film. None of this chimping at the back of a camera. So up until from basically the mid-90s all the way through to where we are now, it's been a very, very sort of organic process, and has changed and shifting patterns with not just the photo identification side of things, but also the loss of certain individuals and animals that we just don't see now. And indeed, right up until modern day, indeed last Saturday when Steve and Karen were fortunate to see the latest addition to the Scottish orca population with the calf of the 169 spot, female 170 has had a calf. So it's basically it's not only a collaboration but also a celebration of everybody's hard work and dedication. And this is where I think it's one of the most successful citizen science projects ever launched, potentially in Scotland, certainly in the cetacean world, possibly in the mammal world as a whole. So it would not have been possible without, from my point of view, certainly the co-authorship of everybody that's here in this meeting, and also Andrew Scullion, who's missing, but also under the guidance and dedication and mentorship, if you like, of Andy Foote. So from my point of view, certainly just an absolute joy to be involved with, and from a Shetland perspective as well, just amazing that so many great photographers contributed to that here.
So Steve, do you want to talk us through what actually is the sort of basics of photo ID and how that's evolved with this catalogue?
Yeah, sure. So the fundamentals of photo ID, you're looking at distinctive markings on each animal, and then comparing them to a catalogue. So obviously, as the catalogue evolves, the animals are also evolving. So we're mainly looking at the dorsal fin. As you can see on the slide there, you've got the dorsal fin, and then you've got the grey saddle patch behind the dorsal fin. And each of those act as almost like a unique fingerprint for each animal. So the dorsal fins often will show nicks and notches. So, for example, John Coe on the cover, he's probably the most distinctive animal. You can ID him at a million miles. He's got a huge notch out of his dorsal fin. It doesn't take a genius to work out it's him. But some of the other animals that haven't got markings or notches or nicks out of the dorsal fin, we have to rely on the saddle patch. And if we get some decent quality photos, you can look at the saddle patch and you can see all the rake marks and the scarring that's been formed on those saddle patches. But we've also started using eye patches. So particularly with the calves obviously they're just when they're born, their dorsal fins aren't marked at all, and their saddle patches, you can barely see them. They're almost they're very indistinct. So actually, we found that looking at eye patches has been a really, really good technique of keeping track on what's happening with the youngsters. So if we look back, one of the unfortunate things, for example, one of the pods, it's really difficult to match the individuals. I think it's the 65s pod. It's really difficult to work out who's who because there are a lot of youngsters there, and we weren't using eye patches then. But yeah, things move on. When you get a young male, for example, the dorsal fin sprouts. So again, you can use the saddle patch and the eye patches to match them, even though the dorsal fin doesn't match.
Yeah, excellent. And Karen, why is photo ID actually important? I mean, why do we use photo ID?
Well, it's non-obtrusive to the animal for a start. Anybody with a camera can do it, and as they says, the animal's changing the whole time, and cameras have come on a long way, so we can photograph an animal and look at it straight away and be able to tell there and then who it is.
That's the perfect answer. That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's a perfect non-obtrusive technique. Look at what's happened literally yesterday with John Coe. A guy camped out on Waternish, merrily watching the sea, saw two orcas, took photos, and lo and behold, John Coe and Aquarius. And we now know that they're back in Scotland. They've travelled 900 kilometres in 9 days. And we also wouldn't know that they'd been in England if it hadn't been for the other guy, Will McHenry. So and as Hugh was saying, literally anyone can do it. You don't need to be a scientist, you don't need to be a researcher, you just need to have a camera and a good pair of eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, is quite clear when you look at the acknowledgement. I mean, there's hundreds of folk there in the acknowledgements. It really is, as Hugh said, a real proper example of citizen science. But how can folk get involved with this sort of project and any future updates?
There's a plethora of Facebook groups now, as I'm sure most people, looking at this will almost certainly be members. And I think, contributions, it doesn't mean that you have to live in one of those areas like sort of Caithness or Shetland or Orkney. Even if you're on holiday, you can be, submitting these images, at the time, or indeed when you get home, or indeed, looking at other, historical records are just as important as well as current day records. So it's not unusual for us to actually backtrack and go back and seek out other people's images. And likewise, we would encourage people to share their own images with us, where 10 years ago, maybe there wasn't a platform, for images to be shared. So if you've got any other images, please do submit them either to one of us or to Sea Watch Foundation. They'll certainly end up, hopefully allowing us to have a look at them and maybe make an identification. But the Facebook group, so first and foremost, Orca Watch is a brilliant resource that covers the whole of Scotland. And then you've got your geographical Caithness and Moray, Shetland, Orkney, the Western Isles, etc. So all of the coastal regions are covered. Certainly, and there's quite a few sort of English, little sites cropping up now as well, which are more dolphin orientated. But look, if you're interested in orcas, you're going to be interested in other cetaceans as well. So go join them. Yeah,
and Karen, do you need to go out in a boat to do this? To either see orca or to take photos?
I think I've only seen orca from a boat twice, and that was both ferries. So no, that's the answer. All my images, every single images that I've taken has been taken from land, apart from when I've taken images abroad. They've all been taken from the headlands. The headlands were good vantage points, have been better because you're in, or unless you know they're coming up the coast and you're waiting there in a spot for them.
Yeah, that's good to know, isn't it? Because it opens it up to anyone who's visiting the coast. You don't need to do anything special to see them.
I won't lie, it's not easy.
No, absolutely not.
You can sometimes do a lot of running around for nothing.
Yeah,
and sometimes they're just little, like last Sunday, most of the time they were just little black dots in the scope. But you've just got to keep persistent and keep chasing, and the rewards are wonderful when you do get them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, you mentioned it earlier about males sprouting their fins. When does that happen?
Trust you to ask me that question. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression it was when they get to about 14 years old. I think the other two probably know the answer a bit better than me. Hugh's been watching for. He's probably about to show you 34. Are you about? I thought he was going to show photos of 34. So
funny enough, there he is in 2008.
Well, there we go. Yeah. So 34 is such a good example of how the fin can change. And Hugh and Karen, I think possibly Hugh being a bit older than Karen, I think Hugh's been watching 34 a bit longer, but he's managed to get some really amazing photos literally all the way through as his fins changed. And that's one thing we're actually thinking of putting in the next update would be to show the fin progression. But yeah, perhaps Hugh can say a bit more about how 34's fins changed.
Yeah, well, 34, we first photographed him. I think we first ever logged him in Scotland and ultimately UK waters in 2006. We were in Moosa Sound. Actually, we were filming, to name drop here, for the Alan Titchmarsh Nature of Britain series. And, what a day. We were around them with Tom Jameson, the skipper of the Moosa boat. 2 hours. They were just literally they didn't even make a kill. They were just around us, just not playing, because obviously orcas don't do that. But they were in and out of the sound. We photographed certainly 27. That's the first known photographs of that pod as well. And 34 had a very distinctive, as Karen, she can maybe even show the sort of the young 34 there as a picture. It's a very interesting little fin. It was a very round fin, very similar to what 73 looks like now. 73, as she develops in the next couple of years, she's going to look like that. And it was a very sort of rounded fin, and then it started to sprout and become a lot sort of more rounded, and it became one of the most obvious and distinctive fins that we were seeing because of the shape of it. And over the last 15 years, that fin has evolved. It's actually getting quite tall now. In the last couple of years, it's changed, and many of our listeners and people joining us tonight will be aware of the neck, the cuff mark out of the left top anterior trailing edge of it as well, which is a very, very obvious feature and by far its most defining feature at the moment. So it's he's into his 20s now, and how long will he and his brother 72 still be within this pod? Will we see them split? Will we? There are 8 animals at the moment, which is getting to that sort of the high end of a transient pod. So are we going to see potentially one of the males split and leave with one of the younger animals?
So I guess the killer whale world is a bit like a soap opera, and I thought it'd be nice to go through some of the characters that we hear so much about and see on Facebook. So I guess starting with one of the famous ones, John Coe and Aquarius from the West Coast, and really over to Steve, because for some reason they just don't like coming north, these two. So the pod is, pretty precarious, only 8 that we know of. I mean, in reality, do you think there's still 8 of them left, or is it just the boys?
Well, given that before 2016, the females were being seen regularly, I think personally there's only 2 left. Obviously, John Coe and Aquarius. With the increase in social media and the number of people getting out and about watching, I just can't believe that no one would have seen them in that. In 5 years, no one's seen them. I find that hard to believe. I would love to be proved wrong. Like, more than anything, the thing I would most want to see is, the West Coast community females. I would love to be out on the boat or anywhere, or even see on Facebook. I'd love to see that reported, but I just can't see that happening. So yeah, we've just got the 2 left, and as news has been hot the last couple of weeks, with them obviously being off Cornwall and then appearing yesterday off Waternish. The trouble is with them is obviously they're critically endangered, soon to be very endangered. John Coe's about 60 years old, first seen in 1980 by Peter Evans when he was out on a research trip, and he was an adult then, so he's really at his upper age limit. So it won't be long before good old Aquarius is on his own, and then I don't know what will happen with him. That'll be really sad to see, I think.
And do you think, with a recent trip down to Cornwall, now obviously missing for 7 months, certainly in Scottish waters before then, or hadn't been seen, I mean, do you think they'd gone maybe further afield and gone down to see, some of the killer whales that are seen off the sort of north of Portugal, Spain area?
Well, me being the geek that I am, whenever I don't know what the other 2 do and what you do, Karen, actually, but whenever I get an orca sighting somewhere or hear about an orca sighting somewhere irregular, I go straight onto my phone, find out as much information about it as possible. And one of the things I do, being a boat geek, I actually go into the charts and look at the depths. So I actually contacted Will, who'd seen them in Cornwall, found out how far out they were so that I could see what sort of depth they're in, and then looked at the contours to try and get an idea of pretty much where they came from. Now, I personally find it very hard to believe that they've come from the English Channel. I might be wrong, but looking at the depths and the contours that I know they follow up in Scotland, I find it really hard to believe that they had gone through the English Channel, especially when the number of boats that are out, it's a busy area. I would expect someone in that English Channel to see them and report them. Given that they've been gone 5, 6, 7 months, who knows where they've been? 100 kilometres a day these guys are travelling. I said on the radio this morning, if you add on 900 kilometres south, a week ago they could have been in Spain. And I chatted with Hugh about this a couple of weeks ago, again when we were both on the radio. It wouldn't surprise me if they'd been down in somewhere like the Bay of Biscay, which is obviously a real cetacean hotspot. And given that John Coe and Aquarius, their diet is cetaceans, they've obviously got to be somewhere where there's food. So Bay of Biscay would make complete sense. I just find it bizarre that no one's seen them. It's amazing. But then, they've travelled the last 9 days. They've travelled all the way up to Scotland without being seen somehow or another. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing they got that far, especially as it, there was lots of people in Wales and, other parts of Scotland were looking out for them because they thought they're bound to be heading north soon. So it's
Yeah,
quite surprising they sneaked past.
yeah. Well, I'm partly to blame for that. There was quite a few of my friends went to South Stack to try and see them from South Stack, but I think the weather was against them, to be fair. But yeah, it's a big ask, to try and to be looking at this, as we all know, to be looking, to go somewhere and literally sit there and look at the sea, and for a fin to appear the minute you're looking at it, it's asking a lot. And it's partly why Orca Watch is so successful, because you've got, you haven't got one or two people, you've got tens of people, maybe 100 people out looking all over the coast, and yeah, it makes it a lot easier to spot things.
And so moving on to some of the other ones who maybe go a bit further afield in the other direction. So we've obviously got quite a few connections now with Iceland. And Karen, you seem to be quite a whiz at finding those matches. How do you go about, how do you start making that match?
Well, the last matches I think was all more to do with Marie. Marie was just one night about 11 o'clock. Do you know these? And it was like, da-dang, yes we do, because we didn't know. And I was raking trying to find photos. I'm not the most organised, but now we've started getting to know who's with who. So the matches are a wee bit easier. Does that make sense? And Marie kind of has an idea who's hanging out with who when she sees them in bigger groups at the fish. And then, so she sometimes comes back to us. But if we see any individuals with a pod we know is Icelandic, we'll automatically send it to her. I think Musa was the first ever one, and she's one of the famous ones from the Icelandic. She's got, like John Cole, she's a female, obviously, not a male. She's got the big notch, so you can see her at quite a distance, and she's very... But I'm pretty sure she was the first match, I think, from Iceland and Scotland.
We should say that Marie from Orca Guardians Iceland's an absolute legend, and although she's not one of the co-authors of the catalogue, she's been absolutely brilliant in helping us, as Karen says. So she works out on Lauki tours in Snæfellsnes Nest Peninsula. I was lucky enough to volunteer for her last year, and yeah, she's a really dedicated researcher, and doing some amazing work. And we've got a really fabulous collaboration with her, and along with Felipa Samara from Icelandic Orcas as well.
Well, I think it was her and Andy that made the first matches, I think, Andy, with Musa, and that. And I was lucky, I went up to the Snæfellsnes Peninsula and I saw the Hulk. So I've seen the same individual here at home and up there on holiday.
Awesome.
And of course, Hulk and Knot are doing their tour at the moment.
Yes, they arrived last night. Well, first confirmed last night,
I think we're finding that there is a lot more animals in our waters that we're assuming to be Scottish, that I wholeheartedly think are probably Icelandic as well. I mean, the 15s pod that we last photographed, in fact, saw them in Shetland in 2016. The most recent match, 2 animals from the 15s pod. Who would have guessed that? But it goes without saying that, if we're not seeing them regularly around Scottish waters, then excuse me, the chances are they probably are Icelandics. I strongly suspect the 169 pods as well are Icelandics, because...
I was about to say, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, otherwise I think we'd be seeing them a lot more regularly. We're seeing 64, 65s, and if you look at the correlation and sightings as well, we don't see the 169s in winter. They're all April, May, June, July. Karen was with us when we watched them on Summer Head. They were bouncing and headbutting a harbour porpoise on the water. It was incredible. That's the last time they were seen in Shetland, and I think there is a much bigger correlation between the Icelandic population coming into Scottish waters than we think. And I think in 20 or 30 years' time, whoever's taken on the catalogue will be really rewriting everything and talking about these 4 people that did this Zoom interview in 2021, and things will really have progressed from them. And Steve and Karen, they're alluding to Marie and Philippa. Our knowledge of the Icelandic animals in Scotland, it just wouldn't exist without the 2 catalogues that are really benchmark for Iceland and now particularly for Scotland. So we would know very little about our Icelandic visitors if it wasn't for those guys up there.
Then, of course, over to you again, Hugh. My favourite, and I think probably everybody in Shetland's favourite, the 27s.
27.
They're just
They're
awesome.
my favourite too.
Almost
They're your
everyone's
favourite too.
favourites, I would say.
Everyone's
The
favourite. And
entertainers,
it's
the
possible to,
entertainers. I'll never forget.
yeah,
One of the most disappointing days of my life was being in Ullapool and Brian Gray sending me a photograph of a pod, basically with "Is this a calf?" And then I think within 5 seconds, Karen Munro was on the phone, just giving squealy sort of tones and everything, and it was the fact that I couldn't be there to witness it for the first time was a little bit galling. But I mean, don't get me wrong, the news is amazing at the 27th.
Whose calf was that, Hugh?
That's 27, 27's pod, but obviously 73's calf, her second calf that we know. But the 27s, I think everybody in Shetland's probably seen the 27s now, and in Orkney, and it's great as well that they've got that trajectory down as far as as Stonehaven down on the east coast. They really are. They've taken over, if you like, from what were the groovy gang, the 64s, which are now the 64s and 65s. But from a personal point of view, first ever encounter with them in 2006 when they were a pod of 4, and again we rarely saw them in Shetland waters. They were typically January, February records, still as a pod of 4, then as a pod of 5, I think in 2012. The only person that used to see them was Ryan Nisbet on his boat in ECL, and that's where most of the records came from. And I think we had a January record excuse me, in 2013 or 14 where they were chasing long-tailed ducks, they were chasing eiders, they made several seal kills, and I think that's when we sort of maybe got a grip on just how entertaining and how wonderful this pod were. And here we are, 2021, now a pod of 8, and when will they split? Will we see 9 members of the 27s? Will we get to 10, or will they split? This is, I think, on everybody's minds at the moment, that can a pod sustain 2 big, hungry bulls like that? They are killing machines when you see them. I mean, one day, I think 2 years ago, they made 12 kills in our observation time. It was staggering. 12 seals or harbour porpoise. We didn't identify all the prey items, but that's a lot of killing to go on. And as emotive as watching a kill or filming a kill is, it's nature, it's natural, it's what these animals are doing. But they are the entertainers, and just incredible pod.
I think they temporarily split the other night, didn't they, off of Sandy?
They do, and they do that here. In Sandwich. Many of our listeners will be aware of the amazing seal flipping, show. And there were only at the first there were only 4 animals in there. 2 animals came in, and then we didn't see the other animals for the rest of that evening. The pod was split. They did that on Sunday. Imogen Sawyer sent some images the other day where there were just 4 animals that were identifiable. That was 34, 73 and the 2 calves. And even what we're starting to see now in field observations is the separation distance between the pod is quite massive. And that's very similar to where the 64s went along that route. That all of a sudden, Buster might be a mile or 2 miles off. 64 would not be hunting 65. The new matriarch of the 65s would come in, and we're starting to see a bit of that now, where there is this sort of separation of the pod. So whether that's a social structure change or shift, or whether it's a hunting mechanism shift, who knows? But I think it's only a matter of time, maybe the next 3 to 4 years, before we do see the 27s reduce in number, and is 73 is clearly a very, very capable mother. She's now on 2 calves, and Vela, being the matriarch of the pod, also incredibly capable. But that's maybe what we should do, is have a competition on see who goes where. Who does 34 go? Does 72 go? How many of us would have sat here and 4 or 5 years ago, where we were seeing Buster almost every week in Shetland, how many of us would think that pod split? We had no idea. And here we are today.
It's all very, very intriguing, and I guess that's what keeps us all interested in what's going on with them. So I guess going back to the start, what's your memories of your first ever orca encounter, Steve?
Well, my very first time I saw an orca, unfortunately, was in captivity, and I think that's like most people. And to be honest, it was very uninspiring. I lived in Hong Kong. I was a 6-year-old, and I wasn't bothered about seeing the orca. There was an amazing aquarium at the same place, which I was really excited about. So it wasn't until when I moved to Scotland, 2013, I didn't even know there were killer whales here. In 2013, good old John Cohen and some of the other West Coast community were seen off of Findhorn, about 7 miles away from here. And I saw that on social media, and that just changed everything for me. I was like, oh my God, I really want to see killer whales. So then I went off on a bit of a mission, and cut a long story short, I earned the nickname Nayluck, because wherever I went, I just wouldn't see killer whales. And I met Karen actually in 2015 up at Duncansby Head. I was making all the same mistakes that I see everyone else do, like turning up at the wrong time, turning up for a couple of days, expecting orcas to be there. Karen was really cool and actually met up with me and was really nice, told me a few home truths about what times to see them and everything, and it was really good. So 2016, I ended up going to Orca Watch, and unfortunately my trip to Orca Watch got cut a little bit short because the people I was going with had to leave early. And I sat there and I sat there and sat there 72 hours watching the sea, not leaving, and then had to take my friends to Inverness Airport. And I arrived at Inverness Airport to get the text saying that there were orcas at Duncansby Head. And I was mortified. Lots of people sending me texts, ripping it out of me, basically. Good old Nayluck, living up to my name. Anyway, the very next day, I was at work. I was at a real low point, I have to say, genuinely quite depressed about what had happened the day before. And I suddenly got a message saying, Steve, there's killer whales in front of your house. Get home. I couldn't believe it. I shot home, grabbed my scope, and put my scope out to sea. And the guy who'd seen them, Alan Airy, I will love him forever for that moment. He basically said, right, they're up on the surface now. And I just remember panning my scope around, and there was this huge black triangle just sticking out miles out in the sea. And I was like, why has someone put this black buoy out there? What's that all about? And then it moved, and it turns out it was Hulk. So Hulk was my very first orca, and ever since then, absolutely blown away by them. Amazing animals. And that's why I'm so keen to help people out, because I know what it did to me that day. I know all the mistakes I made. I know how depressed I felt. The other people on this talk, they're absolutely amazing people, like doing some really cool things. I haven't got their experience, but spending time with Hugh, spending time with Karen, I've met Karen regularly up at Orca Watch. It's and Colin Bird actually deserves a mention. It's just amazing, like just listening to all the stories and stuff. And I like to try and help other people to get some stories for them too.
And same question to Karen. When was your first sighting?
I got into watching whales and dolphins after seeing a few dolphins here, and was lucky enough to get introduced to Colin Bird. So me and Colin started watching, but I was having a bit like Steve. I kept being the one that turned up just as they disappeared. And Keith Parks had taken these amazing photographs near John O'Groats of the orcapods around Stroma and that, and I was determined to see them and having no luck at all. And then I was on a ranger service trip to Hoy. The John O'Groat ferry once a year goes to Hoy. And it was when we were on the boat on the way over, and that was when the shout came out. And I think we had somewhere in the region of 14 to 16 orcas come past the boat. I didn't have a good camera then at all. They came in at, I think it was about maybe 11 or 12 the first, followed by 5 2 minutes later. And the only one, somebody got a picture, and there was one, and not a lot of people will know him, but Hugh will, bigger. And you'll remember Bigger Karen, I'm sure, from Shetland. He had that little nick in the top, so he was the only one I knew the first time. But I was just ecstatic. I was thrilled to bits. But I had quite a lot of years of no luck after that, and it's only this last sort of 5-6 years it's really started being really good, successful year after year. And I think that's because there's a lot more people out watching now, so there's a lot more news. Before, you basically had to go out and find them. And the first land sighting I found myself, was the first day I'd ever learned anybody my camera. And I'll never forget it to this day. And we had 10 orcas close up following them for 4 hours. And I'll never know who they were.
That's always the way, always the way. But what about yourself, Hugh?
It was a double whammy, actually, for me, seeing my first orcas. We were actually sailing in the Irish Sea, in the southern Irish Sea. We were about 15, 20 miles west of the Smalls Lighthouse in West Wales, and we picked up these blows, which I was into birds. I was 15 at the time. It was 1984, 1986, and just whale blows, and didn't really know the difference between a fin whale or a minke whale, and they were just huge blows, which now we can obviously identify them as, seeing so many fin whales that I've seen in my life as fin whales. And then about half an hour after that, we were just totally psyched by seeing these enormous whale blows, and then just heard this blow really close. Looked around, and there were 2 orcas just sailing by on the stern, and just could not believe what we were seeing. It was just we've just seen fin whales having big rorqual whales like that, and we just saw these 2 huge fins, and they were only about 50 meters away. They came up twice, and then we never saw them again, and unmistakably killer whales. That was really, really sort of hard to take in. But the second time then was a much better encounter. It was the first time I'd ever been to Shetland, same year, 1986, and was coming back on the boat with this in my possession, actually. And the director and founder of the Sea Watch Foundation will remember this. It's the original whale watching guide that us old folks now use. This cost £1.50 in the Shetland Times back in 1986, and this is the sort of information that, I don't know if you can see that we were up against on fin shapes and sizes and things like that. So the pictures were white-beaked and white-sided dolphins and killer whales and things. And it was using this guide, and actually coming back from Shetland on the St. Sunniva with another famous seabird biologist called Adrian Del Nevo, who Peter Evans will know. And we were watching white-beaked dolphins, bow and all of a sudden, again, big fins in the distance that actually came pretty close to the ferry. I didn't have a camera in those days. I was young and poor, and I know I'm just old and poor. But it was just amazing. But I think, none of us will ever, or anybody should ever forget their first killer whale encounter. And what was yours?
What about you, Karen?
Let's
when did you see your first?
Well, it was definitely in Shetland, and I think it was actually Somber Head, and it was back in the days before we had these great sighting networks. So you basically had a grapevine, and if you got a phone call, hurrah! If not, tough luck. And there was a lot of them, like everybody else, a lot of near misses and, oh, you just missed them type conversations, which is not what you want to hear. And I do remember being down at Somber Head, having followed them down, and I think that was actually probably bigger, that one actually. And it was leaning over Somber Head, watching them play with a lump sucker, and that was just like unbelievable. Just you go home happy with that.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and I think us 4 here as well, we're pretty unique in the sense that we've all seen killer whales from our house and from our garden. In fact, I've lived in 3 houses in Shetland, and I've seen killer whales, orcas from all of them. So, and I'm sure. So we're probably an exclusive bunch of people.
Very lucky.
Absolutely.
Very
absolutely.
lucky.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, this is maybe an obvious question, but does it ever get old?
No. In fact, if anything, I think it gets a bit more obsessive. No, my thinking, and it's like, I know this might sound stupid, but like last Sunday, we got the first good sighting, some decent photos. I'd seen them already, but at distance a couple of weeks ago, Musa and that. But last week, got some nice photos, got a good sighting, and it's just like, now I can relax. I've got one under my belt for the year. It might sound stupid, but in those early days, I went 2 years without seeing them, and I was just like, it's not fair, you know. But I don't know. It's just a bit of an obsession, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, you know, that maybe live outside of the little bubble that we're in, will assume that excuse me, we you know, you log on to Facebook or there's orcas being seen. I think people just see that this is a sort of daily occurrence for us, and sometimes it is, but there's a lot of work that goes into you know, to getting good orca encounters. I mean, any orca encounter is good, but you know, certainly getting good photographs, good drone footage, and just making sure you're there. You know, it's I don't know. I think my life revolves around being in a hotspot always where I've got a signal, because you're terrified about just being somewhere and out of signal for a couple of hours and missing orcas, because it can be that time critical. Some of the distances we have to travel as well are vast. You know, we can get calls about orcas in the North Mainland, and all of a sudden, you know, it can be an hour and 10 minutes drive, but it's you never get tired of it. It's the thrill of the chase. It's the social element of it. It's the euphoria of looking at the back of a camera and being able to identify that animal, which is a huge thrill, I'm sure, for all of us. But for me personally, you know, the best thing ever is you alluded and you've asked this question: when did you see your first orca? There's nothing better than standing next to somebody and that is their first time. It's you know, somebody losing their orca virginity is just brilliant.
That's fantastic. Brilliant, all of you. Such passion and such an important contribution to science that you're making. I'll just introduce you to some of those that were there talking, who have been able to make it this evening. So we'll just show some faces and then we'll have a break. So we've got Karen there from Shetland, and Hugh next to her from Shetland, Steve still in his van in Caithness at Duncansby Head. So we'll just have a sort of 5-minute break. There are all sorts of questions coming in, like, can we buy your house? Are you going to sell it? And things like that. So there are quite a lot of questions to answer. And I've got a few questions myself as well for you. So we'll just take a break of 5 minutes now. Welcome back, all of you. Hope you managed to get a quick comfort break or get a cup of tea or coffee. So I'll introduce you to our panel that we're talking, some of them talking earlier, and we'll move over to those. So we have Karen there, Hugh and Steve. We've had a number of questions come through just now, and then we've had questions earlier and also over the past few days, some of which didn't get answered. So we'll try and go through a number of those. I won't do them in any particular order, but I'll just ask Hugh, maybe, if you could just say something about what drone you fly and the considerations for safety and everything that you have to apply.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the talk that we did. The sharp-eyed amongst you will notice that my hair has grown in the last 10 minutes, but that's because that was a pre-recording done about 2 weeks. I don't have much hair these days, but yeah, drones, they're becoming a very, very useful and indeed important facet to orca research, particularly with social structures and counting particular animals. I, at the moment, use a DJI Mavic 2. Which is a very lightweight portable drone. And I also use Phantom 4 series as well. Both offer brilliant quality footage, 4K, either at 30 frames a second or at 60 frames a second. But it's becoming more of a consideration now with regards to portability and the actual footprint of the drone itself with regards to let's face it, potentially any collision risk. You know, accidents do happen. In the words of Elvis Costello, and ultimately, whether it's, you know, a drone potentially falling out of the sky into the onto land, or etc. So these are all considerations. I'm a qualified drone pilot, like so many people who do film orcas, and obviously safety of the animals as well as the humans around us are utmost concern. So it's a very fine line. Obviously deciding what makes a good bit of film. If there's ever a stage, if you are a drone pilot or considering buying a drone, if you ever have the feeling of being nervous or is this worth it, then please don't do it. If you're that concerned, that will carry you throughout your flight. The most important thing to do is practice, and practice very, very hard. You're not going to be able to go out and just see killer whales and film them every day of the year. We certainly don't get that here, but there are ways of making yourself a better drone pilot. And what I did for many years is just pretend there were killer whales around the coastline and filming in areas that would obviously safe to fly. What you will need to do if you buy a drone that's over 250 grams or any weight, as far as I know, is now registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. That's a legal requirement. And there are operating parameters that you have to adhere to, many of which you can find online with regards to whether you want to go for more commercial licenses or distance flying, etc., etc. But like anything in wildlife, the welfare of the animal has to come first at all times. And drone flying it looks easy, but trust me, it's not. But as I'll end off on as I started, it is becoming a really, really important facet for orca research, and indeed other cetacean research and other mammal research. And that's hopefully going to be typified and amplified now by the EcoPreds project that's going to be in Shetland very soon, Julia and Sana, and I think you're going to be hearing more about that on Saturday night. So I'm sure Julia will fill you in on that.
Thanks very much, Hugh. I mean, we use a drone as well for filming behaviour and social organisation of bottlenose dolphins and common dolphins and so on. And we tend to do it from a boat, which can be tricky. And we have, on one occasion anyway, the drone had its own mind as to where it wanted to go and it went into the water in the end.
Absolutely, and these things do happen, and this is where it's really important. I mean, it is possible to fly off a boat. The most important thing is certainly calibrate your compass, to get that, and just make sure there's not a huge amount of magnetic interference, because some boats and drones are fine, and others you will get a ditch. And my attitude is, if it's not safe, there's already enough marine plastic in the ocean. We don't really need to be adding, as well as the cost. There's the embarrassment factor. But a good pilot is an honest pilot, and accidents do happen. I had an incident a couple of weeks ago, which fortunately I rescued the drone. But that's technology. It's like driving a car. Occasionally we do have little bumps and mishaps along the way. But please just be careful, when you're doing it, and always put the welfare of the animal at first.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We once were doing some filming for the One show, and the BBC film cameraman, who was a drone pilot, flew it to film our own drone, and then it went. He brought it back, and it went straight into our boat, and that was the end of the drone. So these things do happen. We have another question, actually, from Sana. So thanks, Janet, for those questions. Sana wanted to know, with the 12s just seen in Shetland, could you tell us more about them, and when were they first seen, and who have you matched so far? I think she hasn't caught up on some of that, but would one of you like to respond on that? On the 12s?
It has to be you or Karen, not me, because I've never seen them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good question, and I genuinely, and I'm sure Karen will share my sentiments here, they're a genuinely rare pod. That is only the 4th or 5th time that I've seen them. First time I saw them was in 2017, out on a little headland, just about a mile, 2 miles away from where I'm speaking. And it was actually one of the teachers at the Dunrossna School was actually leading a course for her pupils with the John Muir Trust. So we got a call. It was Gina Scanlon. Gina is married to Glenn, who works alongside Karen there for NatureScot. And as usual, you see the pod, and we identified the 12, the female 12, and then it was the first match of Tilly, and indeed several of the pod members in Shetland waters at least. From memory, I think we are looking at about 2008, 2009, the first time the 12s were recorded in Shetland waters. They are current. Well, they're a pod of 6 now, as we know, with the news of the calf last night. But they were a pod of 4 or 5, I think, at that stage. And Karen, I was watching the broadcast after I left last night, and Karen was talking about the floppy fin 13, whose fin collapsed. He was also a member of that pod. We haven't seen him since. So we're looking maybe no more than sort of 10 or 15 years of knowledge of the 12s, and certainly sightings in West and Southern Iceland by Philippa and Marie of Orca Guardians Iceland as well. They've also been seen, I think, off St Kilda, and a couple of records from Orkney as well. So 2 or 3 records. So generally a rare pod in Scottish waters.
Thanks very much, Hugh. I have a little question here. With the Norwegian coast not far from the Northern Isles, do you think Norwegian orcas may visit Shetland and Orkney on occasions? Have you looked for matches with Norwegian animals? Maybe Karen, do you want to start off on that?
Yeah, I can certainly start. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of photo ID catalogues in various different places in Iceland and in Norway. And Steve's been over to Norway himself. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any matches with Norwegian orcas, or in fact, any of the orca we see here being subsequently seen in Norway. I guess previously we all thought that they were sort of following the herring around, and they were going Norway, Iceland, and then over down to Shetland, and then back over. But that doesn't seem to be happening. So, I guess the jury is still out. I mean, maybe some of the offshore animals that we see more around the fishing boats around Shetland, they could well be matched with ones in Norway, but we just don't have as much information on them.
We've had some sightings and some videos in the past sent through, but they're not really possible to identify individuals from that. Taken sort of halfway between Shetland and Orkney and Norway there. And even in summer, I remember once on Fair Isle, a yacht came in and they'd seen a big pod, in fact, that day before they came into Fair Isle. So I did wonder whether sometimes these may come, but we just haven't sort of observed them yet. Did you want to add anything, Hugh, to that?
I would let Steve have a chat, because Steve's got some really, really good to get it. Steve spends a lot of time in Norway, and this is a conversation that Steve and I have a lot. We've got a bet on the first ever Norwegian match. So Steve, over to you, buddy.
Well, I'm good friends with Eve and Rickard, who are Norwegian Orca Survey, and obviously the majority of people, when they think of Norwegian orca, they tend to think of the orca just feeding on herring. But what's come to light in recent years, particularly from Eve and Rickard, is that there's more and more they're finding orcas predating on other prey. So they've been finding orcas preying on lumpfish, porpoises, and quite a lot of seal action as well. I was lucky enough, I think it's 3 years ago, to take some ID photos of a pod of 4 animals, and when Eve looked through my photos, it turned out it was one of the seal hunting pods. So yeah, they're actually diversifying their research, and they're actually going to put more time and effort into researching the seal hunting pods. So that could turn up some interesting matches. We'll see. There's a well-known group of orcas that actually tend to hunt down in the south of Norway. There was an amazing photo posted, I think it was in April, of one of the orcas with a porpoise in its mouth. Absolutely incredible photo. And yeah, me, Hugh, and Karen, I think we're all straight on to the photographer in Norway. to try and get some more images. And I also contacted Eve from Norwegian Orca Survey, and yeah, she knew exactly which pod it was, and actually that's a regular thing that this pod go down at that time of year to hunt the porpoises. But yeah, they've checked records, and as far as everyone knows, there's no matches to the UK.
Thank you. That's really interesting. We've got a question from Fiona. I'd like to ask the team whether they would recommend a specific type of camera to record and document the orcas. Perhaps start with you, Hugh, if you...
Yeah, well, if there's anyone from Canon UK, then I would say Canon, being a Canon photographer, as usual. Where do you begin? It's a really good question, and it's an oft-asked question as well. There are so many good cameras out there, Fiona. I would say just certainly get one that fits within your budget. It goes without saying that the sort of the big names out there, the Canons, the Nikons, the Sony, the Olympus Micro Four Thirds system now is becoming attractive. But there are some fantastic value for money bridge cameras, particularly the Lumix range. And you can spend an awful lot of money on camera equipment. Trust me, that I can testify to that. And that doesn't necessarily make you a better photographer.
I cost several £1,000s recently because he went out and bought a new camera because of me.
It's very true, actually. Yeah. There's the in thing at the moment, and photographers like to be certainly up there with the Joneses and the Steve Trulucks out there. Is mirrorless. I'm now sort of 50% mirrorless photographer, 50% not bog standard DSLR. I ask myself, what are the advantages of mirrorless? There's not a huge amount of advantages really, other than the sort of technology and the IQ that's going into these cameras. So now is a really, really good time to buy sort of secondhand or used Nikons and Canons, where a lot of photographers have just thought, right, I need the next best thing. Certainly, you are more than welcome to email me. One of the team will happily send you my email address, and I will more than happily spend time with you or speak with you and point you in the right direction. The camera body is important, as is the lens, and an ideal focal length lens would be about 100 to 400 or 100 to 500 millimeter on a full frame body, because orcas can be very close and they can also be very, very far away. So there's a whole host of cameras out there that will get you very good results. But the most important thing is the best picture you'll ever take is the one that stays up there, not the one on the back of your camera.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you say there. I use a Canon EOS 7D Mark II, but you can buy, most cameras are pretty good these days, and it's certainly good value to buy a second-hand one, I think. Well, I mean, when I say second-hand, I mean one that's they've just moved on to the next version, the higher version.
Absolutely, and what you'll find, I mean, is we treat our cameras like extended family. We look after our kit. So if you go to some of the reputable dealers like Wex and some of the bigger retailers that you see advertising online, Park Cameras, they are actually, what I do, I don't sell my stuff privately. I would actually trade it in and part exit. So you get, those guys are selling good quality cameras from people who look after their kit. So you're never going to be sold a damp squib. And I've bought quite a lot of secondhand kit over the years, and for various projects. And no, you can't go wrong with the bigger name. But certainly, think outside the box. It's not necessarily Canon and Nikon, although I use Canon exclusively and have done for nearly 30 years now. Sony and Olympus are putting out some really nice sort of prosumer kit. So, like I said, if you want to discuss further, then one of the team will put you in touch. And there's, just as we have there, that is a Canon R5, the body there, and that looks like a 70 to 200 lens, or is it the new 100 to 500, which Steve has and I don't, because mine's still on back order. But that is the new mirrorless full frame camera, and that camera is capable of giving you an absolutely beautiful 45 megapixel full frame image. It also has really, really good 4K video, which is also another consideration these days. And the 100 to 500 lens is just an ideal whale watching lens, really, as indeed for all other wildlife. It's the sort of kit that you can just throw in a rucksack, go hiking, go overseas when we get our lives back, and we go back to some kind of normality. So yeah, but good luck. But don't think you have to spend thousands and thousands of pounds.
And so both of you favour zoom lenses rather than a fixed focal length telephoto lens?
As a photographer, when I'm photographing birds, I use an 800 5.6 or a 500 f4, and I'm probably going to have to lock my house now for fear of everybody breaking in and stealing it. But this is Shetland, and we don't lock doors.
Someone's already bought your house anyway.
Yeah, so it sounds. I'm open to bids, actually. Yeah, yeah, it's. I think for fixed subjects like birds, I think. But whales, and particularly killer whales, a zoom lens has a massive advantage, particularly in Shetland, and Steve and Karen will both allude to this, as indeed you will, Peter. Where 1 minute you've got a pod, particularly the 27s, when they split, you've got an animal maybe 400 or 500 meters off, and then all of a sudden, it happened to us a month ago at Muckle Row. We had the animals about 200 meters, and all of a sudden, this shape just came under the water. And we had 73, literally, I kid you not, 2 meters away from us. So even 100 mil, I was on 100 to 400 mil lens, and even 100 mil was too close. So it just gives you that bit of latitude. So, like I said, don't think you've got to spend all the money you have on a camera. The best thing to do is put that money towards a trip, go and see the animals, and then save up and go back with a camera, do the same trip over again, and get all your pictures.
Yeah,
I'd say there's a couple of other things worth considering as well. It depends where you're taking the photos. If you're going to be going out on a boat, it's really important to have a zoom lens. Definitely really important, because as Hugh says, the animals can come literally right next to the boat, and if you've got a 400 millimeter prime lens, then you're going to be crying. The other thing is as well is how solid, how well built the equipment is. For example, if it's waterproof, if it's dustproof, if you're on a boat, it's no good having something that's not built to take a bit of a splash. The other thing I find really useful is one of these, which is an extender. So it's 1.4 converter. So I can at any point, so for example here at Duncansby Head, I've got this on constant standby in my pocket. Duncansby Head, you're about 50-60 meters up above the sea, so at the very closest, even if the orcas are at your feet, they're still 50-60 meters away. Obviously, if they go slightly offshore, then that's when this thing goes on very quickly. Stick it on the camera, and that gives me an extra 1.4 times range, which just makes things very much more flexible, and means you don't have to carry around two different lenses. But yeah, as Hugh says, you don't have to have like the latest mirrorless or whatever. There's plenty of decent DSLRs out there. Good second-hand shops in Scotland. There's a great shop called Ford's, which I got second-hand lens for going to Norway. So yeah, give Hugh an email. It'll cost you a few £1,000s.
Yeah, I was going to come in from the other side of the scale, Peter. So I'm a Nikon girl, but I'm constantly surrounded by people with very big cameras on Shetland because of obviously birders and things. And I actually use a Nikon bridge camera, and I think the thing to no matter what camera you use, whether it's a very expensive one or a sort of a cheaper point and shoot one, the point is that you can still get a photo that some of the guys with the big cameras don't get. And that has happened to me. So don't lose heart. Just go out and, if in doubt, take a lot of photos, because you could be the one that gets that shot of a new calf, for example. So yeah, just try.
Totally agree, and I'm with Karen on that. And I bought my daughter one of the Lumix, one of the cheaper end Lumix. I think it was 250 quid. Didn't really want to spend much more than that. And last summer we had a brilliant day with the 27s, and my daughter was with me and accompanied everywhere. I was droning, I was doing stills, photo ID, imagery. Came back, downloaded, and I sort of said, right, let's get your stuff on the Mac. Downloaded it, put a little video together, Dad here got about 1,000 likes, which made my day. My daughter, in a 2-minute video with a mid-range at best Lumix, got over 250,000 likes on Facebook for a video. So it's clear to me that I might as well just give up and throw away all my Canon stuff, if that's what you're in. But yeah, if you're after, that sort of thing. But it just, like Karen says, you don't need all the expensive gear, and just get out there. And Karen's got fantastic, imagery. And look, as long as as far as we're concerned, from the photo ID point of view, doesn't matter whether you send it with the end of a milk bottle or a 15 grand prime lens. As long as we can identify the animal, that's all we care about. But again, just enjoy the moment, and the best picture you're ever going to take, I can't reiterate, is the one. Please, don't spend time just looking through on an iPhone or an iPad. Look at the animals that you're there to watch, enjoy it, because you'll get home and you'll think, oh, well, I've seen all these great images I took on the screen, but I don't really remember it. You're there for that memory, so make sure you make that memory.
And a case in point for that, Hugh, was that encounter in the Murray Firth recently at the end of April. Unfortunately, in front of my house while I wasn't there, but we won't go into that. And the guy was out fishing, got out his mobile phone and sent us the footage. And that was the point when we realised there was a new calf in Scottish waters. Albeit we couldn't work out who it was, but yeah, me, Karen, and Hugh were we were so excited knowing that it was there, and itching to work out, get our big cameras on it to find out who it was. Obviously, Karen managed to sort that out in the end. But yeah, it's someone picked up my camera bag today and couldn't believe how heavy it was. Whereas I'm sure if you picked up Karen's camera bag, you could be running around very quickly while I'm out of breath, 100 meters behind, missing all the photos.
Can someone now tell Steve that they filled his rucksack full of rocks before he carries the next 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, I was going to add that people can take brilliant photos and video on their phones these days anyway. We've identified a lot of really interesting records from that. The first for bowhead in the UK was on a little mobile phone and so on. So yeah, don't give up on any of those, I think. We have a question here, just moving off photography, otherwise we'll be doing that all evening, from Lindsay Ross. I'll put this to you, I think, Steve. Apart from Duncansby Head in Caithness, where else would you suggest is a good spot to go? I presume in that general area.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of good spots. We did a couple of years ago actually put some maps together, and that they were on Sea Watch's website. I'm not sure if they're still there, but in terms of locally, to the south, there's a really great spot called the Trinky in Wick. It's sort of to the south of Wick Harbour. That's a really great spot. You can literally park up in a lay-by. If you're not sure where to go, drive around the road to the south of Wick Harbour, and you'll see someone's actually painted the Trinky on the rocks, so you can't miss it. And you're literally, I don't know, probably about 100 meters away from the shore, but you're a reasonable height up, and the orcas come literally right past there. I've never seen them there, but I've seen the footage. Yeah, that's an incredible spot to watch from, and not just for orcas, for porpoises and Risso's dolphins and minke whales. And then to the west of here, there's a really amazing spot called Strathy. That's actually a really good spot for Risso's dolphins coming in close. You've also got Dunnet Head, which is the most northerly point on the UK mainland. It's a really good vantage point because you're nice and high up. But yeah, I mean, recently, a few weeks ago, I was actually at the end of John O'Groats Harbour watching orcas, and just yesterday watching a Risso's dolphin. So there's plenty of spots. You just need to kind of keep your eyes peeled, get out as close to the shore as possible, and yeah, keep an eye on social media as well. See what's going on and try and sort of get ahead of whatever's travelling up the coast.
Great, thanks. And just as a general tip, you can apply all around UK, is find a headland, really. If you go to a headland, you're in a likely good spot to see either orcas or something else there. really. I have another. Just reading this question. Oh, I see. There's a question about our dates for next year's Orca Watch. It's likely to be around the same time. I mean, one of the problems about this time, but maybe it applies at other times, is that you get this fog, this haar that can intrude. But I don't know whether the three of you have any thoughts about, whether you think the weather is typically better, the week after, something like that, or would you recommend staying with the dates that we have, broadly?
I think there is a pattern emerging. Certainly, we're all over the place. We're at 6s and 7s in Shetland. I mean, Shetland's becoming a place where, well, last November I think I saw orcas 15 days out of 30. It was crazy. And but I think certainly from speaking with Steve and Karen Munro and observers there on the north coast, I think there's certainly a pattern towards the latter end, the mid part of May, towards the latter part of May, that there are orcas around. And the fact that we are up to what I think 4-5 pods in south of Orkney to Aberdeenshire. So we've had the 27s, the 12s, the 169s, Hulk and Knot, and the 19s. So that's 6 subunits of orcas. So there's not many places in Britain where you're going to get that. That's never happened in Shetland over that period of time. And I think if you look, Orca Watch is still a very young event, but I think if you look at the amount of times that orcas have been seen over that sort of 2-week period, the mid to the latter end of May, I think there's clearly some sort of indication that that is a good time to go and see orcas before presumably they shift or indeed start heading back around Orkney and Shetland. And as Karen will tell, I mean, Karen's our queen of data here with what's going on. I mean, every year the graph changes. But if I was in charge of Orca Watch and choosing the date, I would say keep it as it is. Keep it as it is. The weather is the weather. We're never going to change that. We can get Arctic temperatures here in Shetland in June, but fog there with Steve. We had that in the South Mainland. But it's in Shetland, it was localised. Karen and I were fogged out till about 2 o'clock today. Here in the South Mainland, our wildlife tour company were up in the North Mainland. I got an image sent through. It was already 14 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning, flat, calm and beautiful sunny skies. So minus the palm trees. But yeah, I would stick with Orca Watch at that time. Steve, what do you think?
I completely agree. Before I got really heavily involved in Orca Watch, I was speaking to Colin Bird about it a lot. He showed me a spreadsheet. Obviously, Colin was the former regional coordinator for the area up here. He showed me a spreadsheet, and there was I think his data went back something like 13 years before Orca Watch actually started. And there was a very clear peak in May and June. I personally think, actually we were talking about this on the ferry today, I personally think definitely keep it the same. I think you have to time it for the orcas, not for the weather. The weather's a nightmare, don't get me wrong, I'm not impressed with this week at all. But, there's no point timing it for good weather if there's no orcas. So everyone wants to come for the orcas. The haar kind of adds to the sort of the jeopardy of the week. We've so many times we've been sat here thinking, come on, clear, and hopefully the orcas will appear, and then they don't. But the minute they appear, it's going to be so worth all the effort that everyone's been putting in.
Yeah, I totally agree, really, on that. And I mean, we typically, well, over the many years that I've been coming up to the north of Scotland and to the Northern Isles, late May and early June was always a really you could almost time it to the day when orcas would appear there, and it coincides also with when the harbour seals are going to be around to those that are left now, the population declining as it is in that region. But would you agree with that too, Karen?
Yeah, I'll be starting to look at the May data actually for this year. But as Hugh says, it's it can be quite variable. So when you're looking at sort of north of Scotland, yeah, it seems to be quite predictable for end of May. But for Shetland, it seems to be maybe a week or so later. So, for example, last May we never had any sightings of killer whales in May at all. I mean, obviously, it was slightly bizarre May because we were all locked down, but we've thought, some of us would have seen something. Whereas this year, we've had 11 days where we've had sightings of killer whales in May. So, it can be quite variable.
Maybe the orcas were in lockdown as well. Huh.
I wouldn't mind adding something else as well. I actually think, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen and Hugh, I actually was quite surprised by how early we were getting regular sightings here. So, for orca, I was unfortunately down in England at the end of April for personal reasons, and I was kind of itching, if I don't mind admitting, I was itching to get back home because I thought, oh, sooner or later there's going to be orcas. And actually, for orcas to appear, I was on my way home when I got the message that orcas were outside my house, and I actually thought that was quite early. And I checked with Karen Munro, and she said it was about a week. Musa had appeared a week earlier than she had the previous year. Karen actually spotted her, I think it was off of Strathie, somewhere off the north coast anyway, about the week before. So I don't know if either of the other two have anything to say, but it strikes me that they're starting to appear earlier and earlier.
And for longer and longer, would you say, really, as well?
Well,
Yeah,
I was going to say, I remember back in the 90s, between 1991 and 1995, we were up in Shetland every year for most of the season. I mean, when I say season, from sort of April to October, because we were studying porpoises. But we were also trying to build up a network, as Hugh knows, to get people to record things. And we had rather few orca sightings. Admittedly, there was going to be lower coverage then. And obviously, social media has contributed to this and helped that and alerted everyone. But the number of sightings that we had were much lower than what we're getting now, and also much more concentrated in that early summer period. Whereas now you can get them any time of the year.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors to consider. I think, Peter will recall when I moved to Fair Isle and then Shetland, the amount of sort of resident naturalists were much smaller than there is now. We've got a whole new generation of folks that are out there, that are walking the banks, that are interested, maybe not. Obviously, as it doesn't matter who's as keen as the next person, but I think the interest level and the awareness level is huge at the moment, and I definitely think there are more animals being sighted, but I think social media has had an absolutely catastrophic shift on the reporting. From a guide's point of view, we were aware that orcas were being seen in Yell Sound a lot, just speaking with the ferry guys, and you get on, you drive the minibus onto a ferry, and it should have been here half an hour ago, we had orcas. Those are the days before mobile phones and before WhatsApp and social media, etc., etc. And there has been a cataclysmic shift in the amount of animals being reported since we set up the Facebook group page back in 2016. And having that reporting mechanism now where somebody, if they sees anything, rissos, dolphins, minke whales, etc., they can actually report it. And I think just having that facility that has been replicated then in Orkney and Caithness all over Scotland, I think has really increased the number of sightings, because what is interesting is that we're not actually recording that many new animals. We're seeing the same pods, albeit a lot more regularly. So, for instance, the 12s pod the other day had, if I'm sure if Karen and I went through all the observers that were putting news out and thought, well, okay, these guys have just moved to Shetland, or these guys are up on holiday in Shetland. And there are people coming to Shetland now looking for orcas and looking for cetaceans that are tapping in and giving us as much information as obviously we're feeding back. So I think there's been a dramatic, at least doubling of number of observers, and it goes without saying that the more observers, the more things are going to be seen. But just with just going back to what I was saying about that encounter with the 12s, that was a school group out, on a John Muir day. Gina, bless her, was going absolutely nuts, and rightfully so. Some of the kids were going nuts. Some of the kids were going, "Oh, when are we going home?" But that's kids for you. But certainly having the recording mechanism and the speed of which information flow can get there, I think is really had a big change in what and the numbers of records that we're getting here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's also helped change the having just missed a pod because it's moved on somewhere to actually seeing the pod because there's such a good network now that you can report sort of virtually on seeing it, and it reaches a lot of people and they can respond to that. And in fact, I remember, it must have been about 15 years ago, when Andy Foote came to me and said, "Do you think it's feasible to do a PhD on orcas in Britain?" And I said, well, I think it would be difficult in the Hebrides, I said, because you don't get many sightings of the pod there, but possibly you could in the Northern Isles. But I was quite worried for him.
Can I just interrupt you? I've literally just had a message on my screen from a lady called Marina Smith to say there's a pod of orcas to the west of Ireland, not Ireland as in Island Bigton, heading north at 9:15. So that's literally a sighting that's just come in 10 minutes ago, that's just come into the Facebook group page. So that will now hit 25,000 people straight away. It's a little bit late for us to potentially be chasing us, but that is presumably the pod that was seen off Summerhead today. So there you go. That's the power of social media. So we've just broadcast that news to every person watching this, and everybody within the Facebook group knows there as well. So yeah, fire up the engine, Steve.
There's a question here which, well, I can answer, or one of you could answer, which is, do you ever, from Margaret, can you ever see a time when there may be a need to put trackers on members of the orca community? I mean, I have a view on that. Is
that trackers on us because we've all got ankle tags somewhere because we've all done bad things in our lives, and yeah. Karen, you're probably the best person to answer this with regards to the licensing of it and how it would work.
Well, I mean, any sort of tagging, as Peter will know and some of you will know, would require quite a bit of licensing and would require a Home Office license as well, because tagging is without its risks. And I guess the question you'd be wanting to ask is, what are you wanting to actually achieve from that tagging? Because as we've just sort of demonstrated, we've got quite a good network. We can pull up links about where these animals are going. So, if you're wanting to put tags on, what is the question you're actually going to ask? So there might be some questions you want to try and ask, but whether that would be the best method to do it, that would be my point. I think also, I mean, when Andy Foote was here, he was trying to, and he did get a license to try and get biopsy samples, just a small skin sample, to do genetics, and he found it incredibly difficult to get close enough to actually do anything like that. So, the logistics of actually trying to put a tag on a large, powerful animal, it would be challenging, I would say.
And it moves fast. Yes. I mean, we've both biopsied and we've tried tagging minke whales in the past. But on the whole, I mean, in the UK, we're a culture of not wanting to really intrude upon animals as much as possible, really. Whereas in some other countries, they're much more ready to do so. And as I think you both said, it's actually the case that for a lot of information, you don't need to. You're tracking them yourself, really, at least in the coastal areas. I mean, we have also tracked them from a boat. It's sometimes difficult to keep up with them, but I've I've done focal follows with orcas in the Hebrides, and all day, I mean, for about 14 hours, actually, where they've covered a distance of about 100 kilometers in that day. So, you can do that without, making sure one is not intruding on the pod. So I think, for some of the shorter term stuff, it's definitely possible to do it without being intrusive at all, really.
It comes back to what Hugh's point was on the first question with the drones. It's we should always be considerate of the animal's welfare above anything else. If, as Karen says, we've got some burning question which we need to answer, which perhaps the orcas' lives depend on it, then yeah, perhaps it's worth the risk of tagging them. But otherwise, yeah, leave them be, let them do their thing. And yeah, we've the whole catalogue, the whole proof of everything we've talked about this evening is basically living proof that we don't need to tag these animals. We're picking up all this amazing information, the help of everyone else in the community, without sticking a tag in them. I've seen tagging actually take place in Norway, and yeah, obviously you don't want to mention any names, but it's a horrendous experience, I think, for the animals. I mean, okay, they get tagged, but then they get pursued by the researcher, well, this particular researcher, and yeah, it was just awful. Like seeing there was a male orca that I saw tagged, and you could see he was really stressed out. He was following the boat. He was peck slapping. He was seriously upset. I need to mind my French. He was not a happy bunny, and yeah, I just think it's also unnecessary. I don't know what that researcher was gaining from that experience, because all you could see was the orca was not behaving, naturally. He was upset. So what's the point?
Yeah, yes, I think that's a fair statement there. There was a question that was asked early on, which I wanted to come back to because we didn't fully deal with it. And it was the question of what might have happened to the other 6 members of the Hebridean, the West Coast pod, besides sort of John Coe and Aquarius. And I just had a few comments to make there. One is that one has to bear in mind that this is quite probably quite an aging pod, since some of those individuals I did see back in 1980, and they've been around a long time, and maybe much of the pod had then. We have some evidence that pod had split, because when in the early days of seeing John Coe, the biggest group I saw John Coe in was about 20 animals, and then in the next decade, in the 90s, the biggest group I ever saw it in was 14, but usually it was about 12. Quite often, obviously, the males would go off on their own. There might be just a couple of them, like John Coe and Floppy Fin, or John Coe and Aquarius. But after that, that pod got smaller, really. So maybe initially the pod split into 2, and one became, our first sighting was in the Outer Hebrides, actually. West of the Outer Hebrides. And it could be that one pod split off. That pod split into 2, and part of that went into the Inner Hebrides more and homed in more on the marine mammals that were increasing at the time. Seals, quite a lot of harbour seals around, they're steadily increasing, and started to specialise on those. And so now, it may be that we have lost those other 6. Sadly, that would be. But it may also be that they've moved somewhere else. They could have moved to off the coast of Ireland, or further off in the Outer Hebrides. Those are not areas that are very well surveyed, and we have to bear in mind that we don't have eyes everywhere, and we tend to have our eyes sort of mainly in these coastal bits. And so if the pods are going further offshore, and I think that's what happens in the Irish Sea, because generally speaking, when I've been doing surveys offshore, I've seen orcas out in the middle, out in the Celtic Deep part there. And I personally have never seen them close to the coast, although we have got these sightings as well there. But so they can often be away from land, and we're just missing them. So I think that might be occurring. And Ireland is even more the case, where there's not very much watching further offshore. As to whether they've gone down to Biscay, they might have done, but we have a lot of surveys down there, both boat surveys and aerial surveys, and we get very few sightings of orcas there reported, until you get round to the Iberian Peninsula, where you've got the orcas coming up from Gibraltar that are sort of tuna specialists there. So I think we shouldn't give up on them. I think we may still have them. Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, the thing that I always find bizarre is how often there were sightings before 2016, and then how since 2016 it's just John Coe and Aquarius. Obviously, Lulu was lost, so we can account for her. But where have the other 6 gone? It doesn't make sense that all 6 would suddenly die at the same time. That would have to be some catastrophic incident, obviously. So it would make more sense that they have gone elsewhere. But why are they not being seen? So maybe you're right, Peter. Maybe they've moved offshore. But why wouldn't they come back? Why wouldn't we have seen them, in the waters that we've traditionally seen them for so long?
Yeah.
I agree. The ultimate sighting for me would be to see that pod with a new calf. I mean, that would just be, oh my God, what I would give for that to happen. But I don't know. We've just been talking about how social media and people's awareness and how news is spreading. That's grown in leaps and bounds in the 5 years since they were last seen. So I don't know. I just find it really hard to believe that there's so many fishermen out there, even with phones and cameras and whatever. Well, look what happened in Shetland recently with Ryan's photos. I find it hard to believe that there isn't a fisherman out there that would have seen them, for example.
I think there are definitely shifting patterns with certain pods, and Karen will hopefully agree with me here. I mean, certainly since 2016, we've gone through various phases of certain pods becoming more prevalent in Shetland waters. Prior to 2016, the two predominant pods were the 64s when they were a pod of 9, with the famous Bull Buster, and the 19s, the Musa pod. Those were the two most encountered pods by a country mile. The 27s, in complete contrast, as we alluded to in the earlier interview there, we would only see typically a few times in the winter months from about 2011, 2012, 2013. And we rarely see the 19s, the Musa pod now. I haven't seen them here since 2018. I don't think there's been a record in Shetland since 2018. And the 64s, as we know, they've split to the 64s and 65s. They are also pretty rare. 1 or 2 records every year now would seem to be the norm, where the 27s have certainly become the predominant pod. So I'm wondering, with the West Coast community, whether there has been just a sort of concentration over sort of 10 or 15 years where they have utilised the waters around the Hebrides and been seen so frequently, and then have shifted elsewhere, either offshore or indeed further south. And Peter mentioned the Bay of Biscay there. Many of you, hopefully some of the people that are watching this, will have accompanied me out on various trips into the Bay of Biscay. I crossed the Bay of Biscay over 80 times and back over a period of 10 years between 2000 and 2010. And I saw orcas twice. So, and the cetacean abundance in the Bay of Biscay is enormous. I mean, it is one of the best places, if not the best place in Europe for cetacean density. So, like Steve, I find it really odd that, animals that have recently photographed up until 2009, 2010, I mean, 10 or 11 years ago is nothing, for orcas. And it is odd that a number of orcas seem to have disappeared. So I think they are, and I would like to think they're still out there. And it's a bit of an enigma, but hopefully, one day it will get solved.
Yeah, maybe we'll see them again.
One thing I'd like to ask you, Peter, actually, is I was made aware of the presence of some Well, okay, so we always refer to the two types of orcas being present in Scottish waters as type 1s and type 2s, and type 2s being the same as for everyone else. Obviously, I know you guys know. Type 2s are the type that the West Coast community are. I was made aware that there's actually more type 2s being seen sort of up around Svalbard, and I was pointed towards a YouTube video actually of orcas. Sorry, you got Riley moving. Orcas actually hunting minke whales around Svalbard. So, I mean, is there a possible link there? Maybe
There might be, yes. I mean, I think I personally, this is a gripe I have, is that I think people too easily categorize animals into one particular type. And some of that is, I think we've talked about this before through the week, some of that is due to how people inferred the mammal-eating versus the fish-eating ones in the Pacific Northwest. But even there were animals that were switching between them. And we know that this happens with the fish-eating ones that are off Norway that will then sometimes chase seals. We know that the ones there also will come in around Shetland and take seals there. And also the pod that John Coe is in, I have actually watched it, that pod, feeding on what we thought were herring, and then move off and start hunting seals in the same day, actually within about 2 hours of one another. So these things, it's not hard and fast. And I think it may be that, what they're doing is they're really responding to food availability. They can move to both. They probably have started to specialize quite a lot on a prey that is reliable, like seals there, if there's plenty of those around, and they're hauling out at particular sites, so they'll visit those regularly. And so they'll specialize further and further into that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't switch at all at any point. Admittedly, when I saw that occasion that I've just described, that was back in the mid-1990s. I don't know whether that's been seen since then. But I think there is some flexibility, and we have to recognize that these animals, they're intelligent, they want to find enough food, and if food moves around, as we know very much happens with the herring migrations, then they're going to track those, I think, and they'll make these scouting trips, as has been shown very much from telemetry studies, where they'll go off for an occasion, as possibly happened with John Coe and Aquarius the other day, when it went off down to Cornwall to hunt around some of the sites there to see if there was something to take there, and then move off back to the Hebrides. So I think there's something that probably we should think further about as being sort of normal orca behavior. I think we should, there are loads more questions, but I think we should bring it to a close. I just end up with a couple of more light-hearted questions for each of you. I think they both came from the same person, but I'm not sure who it was. One is, does orca watching ever get dull? And the other one is, what do your families think of your obsession? So maybe, Steve, I'll start with you. If you could answer both of those.
Well, I'll show you what my family in inverted commas think of my orca obsession.
Yes.
He's really not impressed. We've been out in the fog for how long we've been here? 5 days now. He's used to coming out on the boat and seeing killer whales with me. He's used to seeing lots of dolphins with me. I think he has a good time with all the other orca watchers, so it's not all bad. But yeah, I think the rest of my human family, I think they understand it, to be honest. They know how passionate I am about things, and it's just, I don't know, without sounding too hippie-like, orcas, cetacean watching, it's made a massive difference to my life. I used to live down south and had a normal job and what have you, and then I moved to Scotland to a house where I could suddenly see bottlenose dolphins, the Murray Firth bottlenose dolphins. And yeah, that without going into it in too much detail, that really changed things for me. I got really passionate about it, and yeah, as I said in the pre-record, my first orca experience really changed things for me. I spent 3 years looking for orcas and a lovely nickname, and I just didn't want that to happen to anyone else. And of course, it still does, but I really try to do my best to help other people out and sort them out so it doesn't happen. But people seem to get the obsession. I think there's more and more people turning up at Orca Watch and becoming the same, I have to say.
Yeah, it's very infectious, isn't it? Hugh, what about you?
Well, I mean, I'm lucky. I've had the sort of support of my family really from a young lad. I've really, other than playing rugby and knocking 7 pounds out of people for 80 minutes legally, I've known nothing other than wildlife. So I had the support of folks and family where I'm from in Wales, and lucky and blessed to live in a place like Shetland, where my family are totally understanding and also share my passion as well. So very, very lucky. Does it ever get boring? No, never. The moment it gets boring or you feel can't be bothered, I'm actually itching to get away to try and track these down as we speak, and my phone is bleeping like mad. Are you going? Are you going? It's probably a little bit late, and we've gathered they're quite a way offshore. So, but no, I mean, how can something like that get boring? It doesn't matter. There are good days and bad days, and Karen will allude to this today. Both of us, we got to shout that there were orcas off Sunborough Head. We didn't see orcas, but we live amongst wildlife, and you take the good days, with the bad days, and just the fact that you have the opportunity to even go out and look for orcas, and particularly, the last year has touched so many people, affected so many people. We are truly privileged to be able to live where we are. And I think just to respect how lucky we are and never take that for granted is incredibly important. And there are a lot of folks that have really had a real bad time of it. So if that is one of you, then onwards and upwards. There's it's a great thing to get interested in. It never gets boring. I mean, it's just amazing.
And by the sounds of things, when Hugh gets bored, it sounds like his daughter will take over anyway. It's already getting more likes than him on social media.
Yep, absolutely.
Better photos as well.
Totally agree.
And finally, you, Karen.
Private Mr. Truluck.
Karen.
Yeah, no, it certainly doesn't get dull. I'm sitting here a bit like Hugh, going, should I go? Will I go? I went out earlier. Do I need to go again? It's every encounter is nice, and it's sometimes it doesn't even matter if you see them. I mean, obviously you want to see them, but today I left the house in fog, went down and sat, huge swell, and I had a couple of visitors come up and said, have you seen them? I was like, no, sorry. And then just before, in front of us, we had 2 porpoise appear in the swell. So it was really nice just to share that experience, and realise that actually, even just a porpoise is a nice experience to have. And I guess in terms of family, I mean, I think they're well used to me disappearing and being late to pick up people from school and having to rush out to meetings at work because something's been seen. And my son, he's actually a bit like Hugh's daughter. I mean, he takes really good photos actually, and he's quite interested in doing that. But I have had the not again, which you feel quite bad because he's in a position, he's seen them all his life, so it's privileged position, and as teenagers go, they get a bit bored sometimes. But I did, and I think Keris was actually on that particular one last year as well, where we were all supposed to be in the middle of homeschool, and a shout came out, and I was like, well, you've got the choice of homeschool or the choice of coming out and watch on the Orca, and guess what, they both chose. So that says it all, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think actually the long spells when you're not seeing anything make the time when you do see something so much better. It's really sort of, it grips you then. If you were
I,
seeing them all the time, it would be a bit different, I think. So it's good to have
I've,
those periods.
I've spent all the foggy days telling people here that the last few days, exactly that.
Yeah, yes. Well, thank you very much, all three of you. That's been really great to have you here. There are other questions which we'll try and answer over the coming days, but I thought we'd better bring it to a close to let you go and try and spot some, so that tomorrow, hopefully, when we come back again at 7:30, we'll have more sightings to report. So thank you very much, and thank you all of those who have tuned in to watch this. And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye bye then.
Cheers, guys.
Yes. Bye.